So, I want to begin this morning with a question. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to hold it in your hearts. And that question is this: what do you do when you realize that your actions make you a part of the problem and not a part of the solution? That's a tough question. I know quite a few people out there in cyberland that need to hear that too. So I'll ask it again. What do you do when you realize that your actions make you a part of the problem, not a part of the solution? I ask you that question today because we're continuing in this sermon series called The Gospel According to the Avengers, and we're going to be looking at this idea through the eyes of Iron Man. And if any of you have ever seen the show Iron Man, if you've seen Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, you realize that on any given occasion, Tony Stark, Iron Man, is part of the problem. He's not the solution sometimes. Eventually, he'll figure it out. But at the beginning, he doesn't even realize that he's a part of the problem. So Bernie asked me last week, are you going to do a little synopsis of the movie for those who haven't seen the movie? And I thought I'd take a little time to do that this morning. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the character of Iron Man, not necessarily the movie Iron Man. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Tony Stark, who is Iron Man. Tony Stark is the son of Howard Stark. Howard Stark was the genius who was employed by the government and in cahoots with the government to create the serum in the Project Rebirth that would then create Captain America. So without Howard Stark, Tony Stark's dad, we don't get Captain America. Howard Stark creates the serum that created Steve Rogers into Captain America. Remember last week we talked about Steve Rogers and Captain America. He also is the one, Howard Stark is the one that created the vibranium shield that Captain America carries that allows him to be protected and defend as much as he possibly can. So Tony Stark is the genius son of the genius that was in cahoots with the government to create Captain America when they were trying to create a superhuman soldier race in that time period. Tony Stark, as I said, is the super genius. He doesn't know that he's a part of the problem. He's so smart. He's so charismatic. He's so filled with himself that people call him narcissistic. Personally, as I said, Tony Stark is my favorite. Tony Stark is my favorite because I think Tony Stark represents the human condition that we see in our world right now. He is the human condition. Iron Man is the human condition that we are confronted with every single solitary day. He is the man with too much money, too much power, too much control, too much influence, and he doesn't even realize what his actions are doing in the world. And yet, Tony Stark is also the human suffering moment. Because if I were to analyze him, I would not say he was narcissistic. I would say that he's suffering from grief. He is a little boy who felt like he could never live up to his dad's expectations of him. He's a young man who lost his parents tragically without ever being able to reconcile with his dad. So I think his main motivator in this world is grief. It's not narcissism, it's grief. And his grief comes out in such a way that he appears narcissistic. Tony Stark is us. Where Captain America is the ideal us, Captain America is the one we always want to be, Tony Stark is us. He is the struggling human every single solitary day trying to do something but doesn't realize that what he's trying to do is actually harming the world rather than helping the world. Tony Stark is the microcosm of the average American in the world. And of course, because of the movies and because of the comics, we have to take it to the extreme to get that point across. But I could stop the sermon right there because we all see in Iron Man ourselves. Tony Stark is going to be confronted with that reality in the first movie, Iron Man. He's going to be confronted with that reality in Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3 and Avengers Civil War and Avengers Infinity Wars and eventually in Avengers Endgame. Tony Stark is going to be just like us and just like Nicodemus from the scriptures, needing some time to get the point. So I'm going to show this clip, and I want to say again, if you are offended or if you are triggered by military gun violence, please go ahead and take a leave and just come back when you've got a chance and you feel more comfortable coming back. I don't want anybody to be triggered by that. But in this clip, what you're going to see is that Tony Stark has a stark realization that he is a part of the problem in this world. Steve said to me, "You're really going to show that clip in worship service?" It occurs to me that we have to be uncomfortable to really start to get the point in our lives. Tony Stark has right there what we call in my world a come to Jesus moment, right? Coming to Jesus, that the bomb that's going to explode him, it was made by his own company. And that scene begins the movie Iron Man, and it reminds us a little bit about what Tony Stark is, as then the movie gets full swing going, because later you'll see that scene again, but you won't see the scene where Tony Stark realizes that what's about to kill him is his own weapon. And it doesn't really kill him, but what happens later in the movie is that Tony Stark realizes that he literally has been born again. He has been born again because the people that pick him up, the terrorists that pick him up, are there to kidnap him. That's why that scene is going on. And it is because they have the weapons that he himself created, and they want him to build it for them. And he realizes, he understands the consequences of his actions. He realizes that he is the one causing this problem in the world. You know, Nicodemus has a come to Jesus moment too. Literally, he has this come to Jesus moment where he goes to Jesus and he says, tell me, teacher, what it is that we need to know, because obviously there's something about God in you, and if you can teach me, then maybe I can teach what it is. And Jesus says simply to him, you have to be born again. Now, I know the born again language kind of rankles us. It really rankles me, because I can't even begin to tell you how many times somebody has said to me, are you born again? And what they mean by that is, am I doing Christianity the way they want me to do it? Somebody should have said amen on that one. When somebody asks you, are you born again, you have to be careful that it doesn't mean, are you doing Christianity the way they want you to do it? Because that's exactly what Nicodemus is after. He's going to Jesus to say, okay, I'll buy, even though I'm a Pharisee and I'm supposed to be against you, I'll buy that you are going to tell me how I'm supposed to do what you're doing in the world. And Jesus calls him out on it. He says, are you kidding me? You are a teacher of Israel, and you have to come to me to ask me how to be of the Spirit in this world? Are you the one really standing here talking to me, asking me how it is that you're supposed to be of God in this world? Nicodemus has this come to Jesus moment. I would bet he's probably uncomfortable when he realizes that Jesus is actually saying to him, you're part of the problem. You, Pharisee, the leader of Israel, one of the leaders of Israel, you, the teachers of Israel, you're part of the problem in this world. You're not creating solutions. You are causing problems. It occurs to me that we get asked that same question every single solitary day in our lives, and we may or may not be paying attention to it. We, like Tony Stark, as I said at the beginning, we're the ones that are going through our lives. We've got too much power. We've got too much control. Tony Stark is really a person who doesn't care about anybody, not even himself. Some days, we would be hard-pressed if somebody asked us to say, who do we care about? We'd be hard-pressed to come up with answers, because everything that we want, everything that we need is so much more important, is so much more gratifying, is so much more for us that we focus upon that. That question that I asked you becomes very pertinent right now. What do you do when you realize that you are a part of the problem rather than a part of the solution? Do you become born again by listening for Jesus calling you to change? Or do you keep on doing exactly what it is that you've been doing? We would find out if you have seen all of the Iron Mans and a lot of the Avengers movie, that it takes Tony a really long time to figure out that he is a part of the problem. How many people here have seen more than one Iron Man and seen some of the, Keegan's got his hand way high back there, and seen more of the Avengers? Keegan, it takes Tony a long time to figure out he's a part of the problem, doesn't it? Takes him a long time. It took Nicodemus a long time to find out that he was a part of the problem that Jesus was identifying. It's taken us a long time. I'm aware today that as we sit here in the comfort of this sanctuary, as we sit here watching our movies and feeling the air conditioning and being a part of everything that we know, that there are people in this world who are living in fear because they're afraid of this. Do you need to fear a knock at your door? Anyone in this sanctuary? Do you need to fear a knock at your door? I don't. But we have brothers and sisters who worship the same God that we worship today, hiding and living in fear and avoiding that knock on the door because we have, because of our privilege, labeled them illegal. We have said they're not going to help us get what we want and maintain what we want, so we need to get rid of them. Sort of like Tony Stark's weapons that he sells to the government in these movies so that the government can maintain this idea that they are powerful. We are searching for the power, and anything that threatens that to us, we want to get rid of. We want it gone. We want it out of our lives. And yet, if we were to have a come to Jesus moment, if we were to go to Jesus and say, what is it that we're doing? We might realize that Jesus would turn to us and say, what you're doing is causing the problem. What you're doing is causing harm in this world. And I know it's very easy to sit in our very cool, very beautiful, very historic sanctuary and think that we don't have any part in this. This is not anything that we're a part of. But my friends, I have to tell you, that is the number one place you have to start. When you think an issue in the world doesn't have anything to do with you, it does. You have to start there, looking at how you are perpetuating that problem. My disciple students always worry about me asking the question, are you shopping at Walmart? Are you shopping at Walmart? I shop at Walmart every once in a while. But I only ask that question because we know that there's a wage inequality gap there, and we're participating in the wage inequality gap the more we shop there. But here's one that hit me yesterday that I want to use to illustrate. Yesterday, all day long, guess what I did? I complained about the heat. All day long. Complained about the heat. It was horrible. I was sweating. I couldn't stay in the house long enough. I don't want to clean this garage. It's massively hot out here. What am I going to do? And I found every excuse that I possibly could to get myself back in my garage, or out of my garage, back in my house, out of my garage, so that I could get cooled down. And then I got online as I was beginning to get some stuff together for today. And I saw this live video come up. And this live video was a video of people in the world out marching in the heat. Some of my own colleagues out marching in the heat to try and bring awareness to liberty in this world, to try and bring awareness to the system that we have of incarceration in this world. And they were sweating, and they were marching, and they were wiping their faces, and you could tell that they were uncomfortable, but they were still out there being a part of the solution. Me, I was sitting on my bed reviewing Iron Man, my favorite, in the air conditioning, complaining about the fact that if I went outside, I was going to sweat a little bit. Do you see how I was part of the problem there? I was part of the problem because I wasn't willing to inconvenience myself to get outside and raise my voice, raise up my understanding of what God's willingness to save this world is, what God's love means in this world. I was too worried about being uncomfortable to go to Springfield with Justo Gonzalez, our conference minister, to march. I was too uncomfortable to go out to Woodstock the other night and march for Lights for Liberty. I was too uncomfortable to do that. Jesus would have said to me, "Don't you know what it means to be born of the Spirit?" Being born of the Spirit means that once that happens, you are going to look at this world like God looks at it, and some of the stuff that you think is so important in your life needs to fall away. You need to become a part of the greater good. Remember last week we talked about how Steve Rogers, Captain America, had this motivation to be a part of the greater good always. Tony Stark didn't have that. Tony Stark's idea of building the Iron Man suit was to get out of that cave that he was being held in. It took him a little time to understand that he could use his genius for good. I would assert that it takes all of us a little bit of time to realize that we can assert the gifts that we have for good in this world, rather than using them for our own ends. Rather than using them to only achieve for ourselves, rather than to achieve for God's children in this world. The reason why I like Iron Man so much is not necessarily only because it's Robert Downey Jr. I like Iron Man so much because every time I watch Iron Man, I am convicted that I have forgotten what Jesus' message is. That movie, that character, reminds me that what I seek most in my life is my own comfort. I seek my own comfort always above the comfort of others. I sit in my cold, air-conditioned bedroom and complain while there are people on the streets in the heat not able to get any respite because I'm not willing to let go of my own comfort. I like Iron Man because Iron Man, to me, is the Christ figure of the entire set of Avengers. He reminds me that I can be changed, that I can be transformed, that Jesus can say to me, you can be born again, you just have to be willing to have it done. You can see the world with the eyes of God, you just have to be willing. You can go out into this world and change it, you just have to be willing. Iron Man asks me to do something when I realize that I'm part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So I ask you again, what do you do when you realize that you're a part of the problem rather than a part of the solution? What do you do? And I don't expect anybody to give me an answer back, but I would appreciate it if you'd carry that question with you a little longer than just for a few minutes today. Because I think if we carry that question with us always, if we wake up in the morning and we think about what am I going to do today if I find out that I'm a part of the problem, we might be well on the way to becoming avengers ourselves. Avengers for the cause of Christ in this world, avengers for good, avengers for love, avengers for peace. Perhaps maybe you would be as convicted as that question asks you to be. Amen. We come